Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship.
The fateful trip of the SS Minnow turned into a zany voyage of more than 30 years for the 7 castaways of Gilligan's Island.
I think it proves that silly comedy does have a place on the entertainment field somewhere. There should be 1 or 2 on television all the time.
Since the series' creation in 1964, Gilligan's Island has never left the air and has been shown more times than any other program in television history. But the sailing has not been nearly as smooth for the cast. The actors received almost no residuals and have struggled to find other acting jobs.
The only thing that means anything to anybody around anymore is the fact that I'm the professor on a show called Gilligan's Island. It's astounding how that happened.
No one resented the Hollywood backlash more than Tina Louise, who portrayed Ginger, the movie star.
She has never forgiven the show for destroying her dramatic career.
If they say, "Are you Ginger?" "No, I'm Tina."
The rest of the castaways, however, ultimately came to terms with the burden of their roles, and some even reveled in them.
The minute he put that cap on, he wasn't Alan. He was the skipper.
In the next 2 hours, we will take you on a behind-the-scenes journey to Gilligan's Island. We'll show you how one of the most popular series of all times almost never made it onto the television map.
I never knew anybody in the program department who liked it. I never knew anybody in the company who liked it.
The sitcom was torpedoed by critics.
It's the beginning of the Gilligization of television.
It was recast and refitted by network executives.
It was devastating. It was the first time in my adult life that I remember weeping.
Eventually, the show was relaunched with a cast who was hesitant to leave shore.
And I didn't really want to leave New York, and my agent said to me, "Oh, this will never go, but you want to go to Hawaii."
To nearly everyone's surprise, Gilligan's Island quickly cruised into the Nielsen ratings as a top 20 show. 3 years later, in 1967, the sitcom was mysteriously canceled.
And we didn't have a chance to say goodbye, to hug all the crew goodbye and everything. There were no final episodes, so to speak.
The series went on to become a monster hit in afternoon reruns and spawned one of the most watched television movies of all time.
That's over the half the people in the United States. So was I right or wrong thinking that people were going to tune in?
We'll tell you this tale with exclusive home movies taken on the set of Gilligan's Island by Dawn Wells and Jim Backus's widow, Henny Backus.
When I miss Jimmy too much, I will play those, 1 or 2 of them. Cry a little bit, laugh a little bit, and it brings them closer.
And you'll hear the remarkable story of survival from the remaining cast members.
30 years later, we're still talking about this. It's mind-boggling to me. I think we are the longest-running show in the history of our television syndication. I think we passed I Love Lucy.
This is the story of the show that nobody wanted, a show that refused to sink quietly over the horizon. This is the story of Gilligan's Island, the true Hollywood story.
The dream of being one of them. From life's ambition was to be a star.
Never recover from the public scandal.
In the early 1960s, CBS was referred to as the Tiffany Network, a nickname the company earned since it aired nearly all of the top-rated shows on television. Ironically, the domination in the Nielsen ratings was due largely to the success of a group of silly situation comedies, including Gomer Pyle, USMC, Petticoat Junction, and the Beverly Hillbillies. But when the programming geniuses at CBS were pitched an idea for a new series about 7 castaways on a deserted island, well, the premise seemed too far-fetched even to them. Programming executive Perry Lafferty was one of the biggest cynics.
I think you could say none of the executives, including me, understood the show, and I think it's natural when you don't understand something, you have to be afraid of it. That's why they were afraid of it. They just didn't know what that thing was about these people on an island.
The proposed series was the brainchild of well-known comedy writer Sherwood Schwartz. Schwartz wrote for many of Hollywood's top comedians, including Bob Hope and Ozzie and Harriet Nelson. In 1961, he won an Emmy for his work on The Red Skelton Show.
I would like to say 2 things. First, thank you. And second, to give credit where credit is due, that speech was written by all of us.
Schwartz began jotting down ideas for his own television series, and in 1963, he had what he considered the perfect idea.
A lot of people think I started with expanding Robinson Crusoe, because that was just 1 guy on an island, and here I did 7. But that wasn't the idea. The idea was a social microcosm of people who had to learn to live together because they had nowhere else to go.
The 7 castaways stranded after their boat is wrecked in a storm included 5 colorful passengers, the skipper and his hapless mate. Each episode would involve the cast in a series of zany misadventures aimed at surviving the ordeal and each other. The bumbling mate would be at the center of most of the show's comic situations. Schwartz felt this character needed a clever name, and he turned to an unlikely source for help.
I just kept going through the phone book, looking for a name that would instantly, as far as I'm concerned, tell you that, hey, this is a comedy show. It's going to be an amusing show we're going to watch here. And I saw the name Gilligan. So I was attracted to the name. And I guess I must have been right, or close to right, because everybody remembers Gilligan.
Gilligan became the name of the skipper's mate, and the series was titled Gilligan's Island. In June of 1963, Schwartz pitched his idea to a group of CBS executives, including programming chief Mike Dan. Dan told Schwartz the show would never be able to generate enough compelling storylines to sustain a series.
The problem with this show was that nobody really believed, very few except Sherwood Schwartz, that it could be run more than 13 weeks.
Schwartz refused to take no for an answer. 2 months later, in August of 1963, he met again with the CBS network brass.
Sherwood persisted in every way possible to keep it alive, and Sherwood had the ability to make you feel it was going to happen. And his ability to convince bureaucrats like myself that it was possible, distinctly possible, that this is just going to knock people over.
Schwartz's persistence paid off as Dan gave the pilot a green light. Hotshot director Rod Amato, known for his work on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, signed on to direct Gilligan's Island.
I read the script once, and I said, is this my kind of comedy? No. But obviously it's America's kind of comedy.
Casting began immediately. The part of Gilligan was the first to be chosen. Schwartz favored aspiring actor and comedian Jerry Van Dyke, the younger brother of Dick Van Dyke.
It was the worst thing I have ever read in my life, the script. It was just awful. Not great like it turned out. But and I wouldn't do it, and they put a lot of pressure on me, but I just thought it was just terrible.
On the advice of his agent, Van Dyke signed on to star in another television pilot. My Mother the Car was a short-lived comedy about a lawyer whose dead mother comes back to him in the form of a talking car. Van Dyke later second-guessed his decision not to take the role of Gilligan.
At the time, I had a lot of regrets because it was a hit, and My Mother the Car went...
Director Rod Amato then told Schwartz about an up-and-coming actor he worked with on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, a sitcom that aired on CBS from 1959 to 1963.
My name's Bob Denver, also known as Maynard G. Krebs, and I'm selling the brand new 1961 Dobie Gillis. Now let's examine this product. Note the fist-to-chin styling, thoughtful yet manly. And see the new, improved design of the eyes? No longer those of a lovebird, but more like a young eagle. And for extra value at no extra cost, me, Maynard G. Krebs, his good buddy.
I knew he was right for the part because he's got that elfin kind of, you know, otherworldly naivete, whether it was false or real. I always felt it was real.
Schwartz was equally taken with 28-year-old Denver and offered him the part of Gilligan after only one screen test. Denver accepted. Filling the role of the skipper, however, was a much tougher task. Schwartz wanted an actor with a big bark and no bite, someone who could yell and scream at Gilligan's pratfalls but still remain lovable. Dozens of reputable actors read for the part, including Carol O'Connor.
Everybody turned mean. You hate a big guy who's just crushing this little guy.
In October of 1963, with filming of the pilot only a few weeks away, Schwartz finally found the perfect skipper. While dining at a Los Angeles restaurant, Schwartz spotted 45-year-old Alan Hale Jr., a big burly actor whose credits included more than 70 movies and 24 television shows. Several days later, Hale was brought in for a screen test.
He had a teddy bear quality to him. He was big, yet he looked gentle. And he was just the guy I was looking for.
Hale was best known for serious roles in westerns and action movies. He jumped at the opportunity to appear in a comedy, according to his wife, Trinket.
my Alan, he was just on cloud 9. I mean, he just couldn't believe that he was going to get this part of the skipper. In a sense, that part was really sort of written for him. I mean, he was a natural, I think, to play the skipper.
With the lead actors in place, Schwartz went to work filling the roles of the remaining 5 castaways: the gorgeous movie star Ginger, the bubbly secretary Bunny, the super-intelligent professor, and wealthy socialites Thurston Howell III and his wife Lovey. 50-year-old veteran actor Jim Backus was the first choice to play the role of Mr. Howell. Schwartz had to double his initial salary offer to sign the well-respected Backus, whose impressive resume included numerous dramatic parts and a starring role in the popular 1950 sitcom I Married Joan. He also played the father of James Dean in the 1955 movie classic Rebel Without a Cause. Backus was perhaps best known as the unforgettable cartoon voice of Mr. Magoo.
Hand me, I say! Oh, my good sir, I'm afraid I'll have to complain about your stagehand. A bunch of roughnecks, sir.
To play opposite Backus, Natalie Schaefer was tested for the part of the frivolous society matron Lovey Howell. The young beauty began her career on the Broadway stage in the late 1920s and later appeared in a number of movies, including the 1945 drama Molly and Me.
Somewhere. Kitty, you can do me a great favor. Oh, yes, Molly, darling, of course, anything. But I must have those photographs at once. You see, Sir Arthur, that's my husband, must never know that I used to be a specialty dancer.
Schaefer's aristocratic accent made her the perfect choice to play the wife of the wealthy investor, even though her background was not in comedy.
I was in New York, and when they sent me the script, I thought, like, this'll never go.
Why was that?
Well, it was so unlike anything I'd ever read or anything I'd ever been in or anything I'd ever seen. And I didn't really want to leave New York, and my agent said to me, oh, this'll never go, but you want to go to Hawaii, and it's a great chance to go to Hawaii, and go ahead and do it.
A trio of younger and less experienced actors rounded out the cast of Gilligan's Island. Blonde Nancy McCarthy was selected as Bunny, dashing heartthrob John Gabriel as the professor, and pretty redhead Kit Smythe as Ginger.
There were about 8 girls that screen tested, and of course, there I was. I mean, I'm looking at all these gorgeous girls, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, damn, this is crazy. I'll just be myself, and I was very fortunate to do that.
The main thing that kept going through my head was, I'm going to be on television. I'm going to be up there. You know, it was for all the wrong reasons. But it was exciting. It was damned exciting.
To capture the look of a deserted island, Schwartz convinced CBS executives to let him shoot the pilot along an undeveloped stretch of beach on the Hawaiian island of Kauai.
He had seen too many sitcoms where it's supposed to be Hawaii. You got 2 palm trees and a frond, and you know, that's Hawaii. And he didn't want that.
The remote location was an expensive venture, though, and production costs quickly ran over budget. Then, as the pilot neared completion, the entire project was abruptly shut down when tragedy struck. The date, November 22nd, 1963.
A guy comes running up and saying, the president got killed.
Coming up on the True Hollywood Story, rough seas ahead for Gilligan's Island.
I couldn't stand it. I didn't like it at all.
And later, solving the eternal question, who's more popular?
I think the reason I got the most was it was boys and girls. I imagine most of Tina's mail was from men.
In 1963, producer Sherwood Schwartz twisted the arms of CBS executives to fund the pilot of Gilligan's Island, a wacky sitcom about 7 castaways on a deserted island. Alan Hale and Bob Denver led a talented mix of veteran and unknown actors, but the odds seemed stacked against the series ever making the air.
I wouldn't go so far as to say they hoped it would fail, but they were all certain that it would fail.
In November of 1963, the pilot for Gilligan's Island was about to wrap production in Hawaii. With 1 day of filming to go, the cast and crew learned that President John F. Kennedy had been fatally shot in Dallas.
We got the news from the teamster who came from the airport, and he came and he told us this news, and there was understandably a gasp of disbelief and a feeling that, well, you know, it's over for the United States as we know it.
The President of the United States is dead. Father Oscar Hubert have just administered the last rites of the Catholic Church to President Kennedy.
For 2 days, the production team mourned along with the rest of the nation. When filming resumed, Sherwood Schwartz moved the company to Honolulu City Harbor to shoot the final scenes of the pilot. But there were more delays. The harbor, a military base, remained closed because of the president's death. With cost overruns mounting, Schwartz reluctantly asked CBS executives for additional money. To his surprise, they agreed. Finally, 3 days later, on November 27th, a physically and emotionally drained cast and crew completed their work.
We all have never forgotten where we were. That's where I was. That's where that whole cast of Gilligan's Island was. And it was rough.
My memories of that last moment of shooting the pilot film are indelibly etched in my head because, I mean, to have an event like that occur, it's bad enough if you're home in familiar surroundings.
Back on the mainland, editing was completed on the Gilligan's Island pilot. In December of 1963, a nervous Sherwood Schwartz screened the show for the programming chiefs at CBS.
I couldn't stand it. I didn't like it at all. I never knew anybody in the program department who liked it. I never knew anybody in the company who liked it.
When you stop to think about Gilligan's Island, it's a pretty far out concept, a little island someplace that these people are on, and they never want for anything. They have everything. Nobody ever gets sick. It's quite a stretch, you know, if you look at it logically.
Gilligan's Island was flatly rejected as a CBS series. Undaunted, Schwartz went back to the drawing board. He completely re-edited the pilot. The new version included one very important addition, a theme song that explained the castaways' predicament.
In one 60-second song, I could tell the backstory entertainingly, and I never would have to use exposition again. You would know what happened.
Schwartz, a musical novice, wrote the famous ballad at his piano in one night.
Was a mighty sailing man, the skipper brave and sure. 5 passengers set sail that day for a 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour.
Skeptical CBS programmers agreed to view the revised pilot in January 1964, just a month after turning the project down. The executives still didn't like the show, but saw enough improvement to give Gilligan's Island another chance. They decided to test the pilot with audiences in New York City and Los Angeles.
Gilligan's was just outstanding. I mean, the audience loved it. It was, they didn't know it wasn't logical and all those things. And the network just really, I think, was sort of just stood back in shock and wonder through all the years.
Gilligan's Island received the highest audience score of all the new CBS shows. Buoyed by the positive response, executives ordered 13 additional episodes and put the series on the fall 1964 schedule.
I knew that 13 episodes would be the very maximum, but by then I would have another comedy ready, or hoped I'd have another comedy ready, and we would say, Sherwood, next time, better luck.
Schwartz had his series, but there was a catch. The network required him to recast the characters of Ginger, Bunny, and the Professor. Schwartz personally broke the news to the actors.
He said, well, they tested the pilot, and the 3 of you, Nancy McCarthy, and Kit Smythe and myself, came out the lowest.
I'd never been actually replaced. So my pride was, I was a little bit like, well, replaced, okay, I'll deal with it. So that was a little bit tough.
It was devastating. It was the first time in my adult life that I remember weeping. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that I built this thing up to such a degree, it was going to be my breakthrough.
Dabney Coleman was one of the many actors who read to replace John Gabriel, but Schwartz was intent on signing an older, more sophisticated-looking man to play the professor. The producer favored a 40-year-old Russell Johnson, who he had originally asked to screen test for the pilot. Johnson turned Schwartz down the second time as well.
I was looking for a show of my own, or at least a co-star with maybe one other person. I had a Western series back in '59 and '60 with Peter Breck that ran for 2 seasons. And, you know, I was looking for a show, looking for my own thing.
Schwartz persisted, and Johnson finally agreed to read for the role of the brainy professor. His expectations were low.
I had done comedy in the theater. This is the first time I was ever involved in comedy on film, even though I was the straight man. But I had no, I thought, oh, this isn't going to make it. And then I tested and ended up with the part.
Johnson brought impressive credentials to the role. During the 50s, he appeared in films with such notable actors as Ronald Reagan in Law and Order and Edward G. Robinson in Black Tuesday. Johnson's television credits included guest spots on Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, and The Twilight Zone. With the professor on board, Schwartz turned his attention to replacing Kit Smythe as the beautiful movie star Ginger. Smythe supplied a sarcastic wit that Schwartz liked, but CBS executives wanted the character to be softer and sexier, television's version of Marilyn Monroe. A network casting agent suggested 30-year-old Tina Louise, a statuesque, 6-foot actress and model with long red hair. In the early 1960s, Louise graced the covers of several men's magazines and often played a temptress in movies, television, and on the stage.
I was doing Fade Out, Fade In with Carol Burnett on Broadway, and then they called me and they said they weren't too happy with the person in the pilot, and, you know, could I play a Marilyn Monroe, Lucille Ball type of character? And, sounded kind of fun. They said it was going to replace the Defenders, and off I went. I figured it would last a year.
Sherwood Schwartz anteed up $10,000 to buy out Louise's Broadway contract. While the actress wasn't excited about the move to Los Angeles, she was excited about playing Ginger. That left the part of Bunny, the bubbly secretary, as the only role unfilled. Schwartz rewrote the character to be an ingenue and changed her name to Mary Ann. Dozens of aspiring young actresses read for the part, including 26-year-old Dawn Wells, a former Miss America contestant from Nevada.
There must have been 300 people, all auditioning all day long at CBS TV City. And they'd match us with gingers and professors, and we'd all, I think I did it about 5 days. I started testing on Monday, and they kept saying, the part's yours, but you never signed a contract.
The assurances didn't mean much to Wells when a striking beauty came in for a last-minute audition. Her name was Raquel Welch.
I think Thursday she walked in, of course, with this beautiful face and this beautiful body, and I said, well, that's the end of that. I won't be getting this. But I don't know whether they offered it to her and she said no, or whether she would have been a better Ginger, actually.
Welch raised more than a few eyebrows, but Schwartz was more intrigued with the innocence of Dawn Wells.
There was a lot of Mary Ann in me, and still is a little bit. I think Dawn Wells is more sophisticated or more worldly because I've gone more places than Mary Ann did. But I think the core of me is very much so.
After a year of endless pitch meetings and casting calls, Schwartz finally had a show and all 7 roles filled. All he needed now was a home for his castaways, one with lots of water. In the summer of 1964, Gilligan's Island was assigned Stage 2 at the CBS facility in Los Angeles' Studio City. The network allocated an extra $75,000 for construction of a 4-foot-deep lagoon. Surrounding the cove, elaborate sets were constructed to create a small village for the castaways. Gilligan's Island was ready for habitation, and the critics were lying in wait.
Everybody said that the skipper was terrible and that Gilligan was a fool for even taking this part, and, you know, all these kind of terrible things.
Coming up on the E! True Hollywood Story, the movie star rages off the set.
She said, I thought this was a show about a movie star with 6 other people.
And later, danger on Gilligan's Island.
And went right on by all the way around. A lion is one thing, but a tiger is another thing completely.
Would you like to shop in style for...
Gilligan's Island miraculously survived what seemed like certain death when the pilot was rejected by CBS executives in December of 1963. But when audiences got a sneak preview of the episode a month later, they gave the show high marks. The programming moguls eventually agreed to a limited network run, but assumed a series about 7 castaways on a deserted island could never work. Or could it?
If you have faith in something, if you have belief in something, you can't listen to the outside world, because the outside world is content with the way it lives. And at that time, there was no such show as Gilligan's Island.
Although Gilligan's Island was not a favorite among CBS executives, programming president Mike Dan began to warm up to the offbeat comedy.
We thought it was very well cast and very well done for what it was. But nobody ever thought it would win a Peabody or an Emmy as outstanding comedy. It was baggy pants comedy for children, young people.
Buddy Epson, who played affable Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, introduced Gilligan's Island during a CBS special in September 1964.
We're all going to be shipwrecked Saturday nights this fall on Gilligan's Island, along with Bob Denver, Alan Hale Jr., Jim Backus, and a delightfully zany crew. So let's all take a peek at the island castaways somewhere in the Pacific.
Gilligan! Oh, my gosh. Man overboard. I'll save you, Skipper!
Gilligan! The minnow's been beat!
But when the passengers wake up and want to get off at the marina, what are you going to tell them?
Think of something.
How are we going to get home? Look at those holes.
Gilligan's Island was given one of the best spots on the fall schedule. Classified as a children's program, the show aired during television's Family Hour on Saturday nights at 8:30. The sitcom followed the highly rated Jackie Gleason Show and faced weak competition from the 2 other major networks. The great Saturday evening time slot, however, did little to bolster the confidence of the Professor Russell Johnson and other cast members.
I had no faith in it whatsoever. I thought, well, I'm going to be employed here for 13 weeks. That's what I thought. I think everybody in the cast felt the same way. I know that Natalie felt that way. Jim probably.
The series premiered on September 26, 1964, and Gilligan's Island nearly sank into oblivion in the wake of blistering reviews. The Los Angeles Times said the sitcom never should have reached the air this season or any other season, and the New York Times called Gilligan's Island quite possibly the most preposterous situation comedy of the season.
We knew. They were waiting. We could tell from a few, like, reviews that was going to be a heyday for the critic.
Terrence O'Flaherty, who covered television for more than 30 years for the San Francisco Chronicle, delivered perhaps the most scathing commentary. O'Flaherty wrote, "It is difficult for me to believe that Gilligan's Island was written, directed, and filmed by adults."
I was horrified. I thought this is a proof that mediocrity is going to be a permanent feature of the television medium. It's the beginning of the Gilliganization of television.
Who cared what they said? We just had to get some more shows in the can, and we're having a good time.
Not a single reviewer understood the show. Whether they liked it or didn't like it, they never understood the basic philosophy of the show. The fact that it was a social microcosm. The fact that great care had been taken to have various segments of society represented on that island. They didn't understand any of that.
Whatever affinity CBS executives developed for the series was quickly dashed by a harsh dose of reality.
The network, of course, knew the show was terrible, knew it was a silly, kind of dumb show, and so when the reviews came out, all they did was simply validate what the network executives already knew.
What executives also should have known was that television viewers have a mind of their own.
When we got bad reviews, it only hurt until the ratings came out. And when the ratings came out, you'd say, well, the only people who like it is the public. which wasn't the worst thing to say about the show.
And the public seemed to love the show. In its first week out, Gilligan's Island finished a respectable 25th among primetime shows. Within a month, the sitcom climbed into the top 20. The show routinely won its time slot and eventually drew a larger audience than its lead-in, The Jackie Gleason Show. Dawn Wells, the youngest member of the cast, was thrilled by the reception.
We were so bad-rapped by the critics and everything, we didn't necessarily take ourselves seriously. I don't think any of us thought we'd be there very long. And yet there's something magical happened.
The magic was in order for 23 additional episodes, giving Gilligan's Island a whopping 36 shows for the 1964-65 season. With the network commitment in place, the actors went to work with renewed enthusiasm. But first, they had to learn how to get along with each other.
There was a bit of tension, so to speak, to begin with in perhaps the first 13 shows. And we had a good, strong director, John Rich. He's a strong man, and we needed that force to get this show on the road and keep it going.
John Rich, who worked on numerous sitcoms, including The Dick Van Dyke Show, replaced Rod Amato as director.
Remember, when you start a show that early, and the actors are not all that secure, they tend to be a little more obedient. They listen very carefully.
One of the most insecure was Natalie Schaefer, who played Mrs. Thurston Howell III. Schaefer had problems adjusting to her television husband, Jim Backus.
Jim was such a aficionado at ad-libbing, and Natalie was, the minute the scene would be over, she would stop, and she kept saying, well, he's upstaging me, I don't know what to do. So Jim sat and they had little conferences about how to ad-lib, and as you watch the show, you see them both trying to outdo each other as they walk off the set, both adding their own little scripts.
But Schaefer's problems were minor compared to the frustration felt by Tina Louise. Louise studied at the prestigious Actors Studio in New York City and considered herself a serious artist. She liked the role of Ginger, but Louise's real motivation for signing on was a promise from the CBS casting director that she would be the sitcom star.
She really came storming into my office, very angry. She said, I thought this was a show about a movie star with 6 other people. She said, I'm not the lead in this. And I said, well, Tina, didn't it give you a hint when you saw that the title of the show is Gilligan's Island?
Louise was incensed, claiming she had been sold a bill of goods. She complained loudly and often.
If there was tension, there was that, because I didn't know what was going on. But she was professional. She did her job. You know, she could have been a happier camper. Everybody else seemed to be happy. She was not.
Since she was the only person who seldom got laughs in a comedy, I think she felt so out of place from the very first time that only her weekly paycheck and everybody recognized her when she walked into a restaurant kept her going at the rate she did.
The adulation wasn't enough for Louise. She threatened to leave the show several times the first season, but Louise was bound by a 3-year contract. The angry actress responded by making life miserable for the cast and crew.
She was a difficult kind of person in a way. Gets her work done, does her work beautifully, but it's not easy. And I've worked with actors and actresses like that through the years. She's a hell of an actress and a difficult lady. That's all I can say.
She had a good role. She looked good in a gold lame dress, climbing around the underbrush. How could she be unhappy?
Creator Sherwood Schwartz had a tough time getting Gilligan's Island on the air. Now Schwartz had to deal with division among some of the cast. His solution was to provide each of the 7 actors a chance to star in their own episode. Veteran writer David Harmon developed storylines for each of the castaways.
We would take each one of the casts and we would center them on center stage, that particular episode. Instead of just being on stage or off in a corner, they felt like they were an integral part of the show, and they were thrilled to be on it.
Unaware of the backstage controversies, audiences tuned in by the millions each week. Viewers quickly responded to the show's offbeat characters. Though Tina Louise was difficult to deal with, her seductive role as Ginger was a big hit with the male viewers.
She had comedic talent, but she was so damn pretty that people often overlooked how good she was. They said, oh, she's pretty, and they just shoved her in a corner. which was wrong because this kid was good.
So was the rest of the cast, and while they each had their own storylines, Bob Denver remained the show's central character. Denver, who never acted until his stint in The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, seemed born to play the luckless Gilligan.
I don't know where Gilligan came from. He was like the catalyst. He didn't really have a background that had any kind of significant meaning. He was just like the person that ran around, caused all the problems for everybody else.
Gilligan always did the best he could do. So you could never be angry with him because he was doing his best. That's how I view life.
I've had kids come up and say to me, you know, I'm kind of a Gilligan, but you loved him anyway, so maybe there's hope for me.
Everybody's smarter than Gilligan. Though I did sometimes play him where he was a little smarter than they thought, you know, just to make it a little different.
Off camera, however, Denver had little in common with his television alter ego.
Bob is introverted, I would say. I think he's very, very, very bright, but I think that the light shining on him is not something that he appreciates very much. He's very private, and I think a lot of that notoriety that came very quickly and all of a sudden, bam, he was a hit show, is something he was uncomfortable with.
Bob Denver and the rest of the cast soon learned that the spotlight would only get brighter. Coming up on the True Hollywood Story, concerned citizens plead for the rescue of the castaways.
Vandenberg Air Force Base was getting a lot of them. Hickam Field in Hawaii was getting a lot of these telegrams. People, there is such a reality about television. Once you see it on television, you obviously believe it.
And later, real problems for Bob Denver.
He was Bob Denver. He might have a few drinks or, I guess, smoke a little marijuana or whatever.
He's part sexual prophet. He's part sexual prophet.
Penthouse's attitude towards sexuality is a very healthy one.
Part religious Puritan.
He joined a monastery.
Part angel of science.
He asked me the 5 most penetrating questions anyone's ever asked about our fusion program.
Part media devil.
I saw us in the role of Hannibal attacking Rome.
How did this humble Catholic boy end up penthouse king? It's the story you haven't heard. Bob Guccione, this Sunday at 10 on the True Hollywood Story.
Rough waters surrounded Gilligan's Island when the series premiered in September of 1964. Television critics blasted the show, and tension developed between some members of the cast. The negative press and backstage drama didn't bother viewers. Fans tuned in by the millions and turned Gilligan's Island into a ratings winner.
A bad show is never that bad when it gets good ratings.
With the exception of creator Sherwood Schwartz, no one believed Gilligan's Island would last more than one season. The skeptics included executives at CBS, the network that aired the show.
I would say the network brass, by and large, were embarrassed by the show because it just seemed to be so lowbrow and it had so much physical comedy in it.
That kind of pessimism made the success of the sitcom all the more surprising. When Gilligan's Island wrapped the first season in the spring of 1965, the series tied with The Munsters as the 18th most watched show on television.
It really surprised us that the ratings were so high. People took to this show immediately. We had this unity of opposites, this dichotomy between the public that loved us and the critics that hated us.
I'm absolutely sure that no one in the company was banking on a second season.
It was no surprise to executive producer Sherwood Schwartz, however, when the sitcom was renewed and another 33 episodes were ordered. Audiences did notice one major change the second season. CBS responded to the rapid spread of color television by filming the series entirely in color.
Read it, Professor. What does it say? What does it say? Read it. What does it say?
Gilligan, will you be quiet so we can tell you? I'm sorry, but I can't take you back with me. If the story ever got out about the way I behaved with the gorilla, it would ruin my career as the ape man.
We won't tell anyone!
The failed rescue attempts in living color looked a bit too realistic for some viewers. Hundreds of concerned citizens sent telegrams and letters to military posts on the West Coast and Hawaii regarding the plight of the castaways.
Vandenberg Air Force Base was getting a lot of them. Hickam Field in Hawaii was getting a lot of these telegrams. And they all said pretty much the same thing. We have 7 American citizens marooned on an island. And why can't we spare just one little destroyer to go over there and get them off the island before they all die? There is such a reality about television. Once you see it on television, you obviously believe it. Because how do you explain the fact that people believe a show where there's laughs in it, where there's commercials, they stop for commercials, and yet they think it's real?
Gilligan's Island defied logic in other ways. In the second season, the sitcom moved from Saturday to Thursday nights, a risky venture for a hit series. Still, the show remained in the top 20. The public's growing fascination with Gilligan's Island didn't mean much to Tina Louise. She was still unhappy in her supporting role as Ginger, alienating herself from the rest of the cast. Louise and co-star Bob Denver were constantly at odds.
She was the movie star, you know, the movie star. And her whole life was just about, you know, being a movie star.
The big conflict that went on all the time, almost the only conflict that went on with the show, which did boil over frequently and get me involved, which is very unusual, was between Tina Louise and Bob Denver. Much of the conflict would stem from Tina Louise's getting into the makeup chair first in the morning and, in Mr. Denver's opinion, taking way too long.
The rift between Denver and Louise widened during a contentious photo shoot.
Really what it was sort of maybe a power thing between the two of them. TV Guide wanted Ginger and Bob on the cover, and Bob said, don't tell me that that's what I have to do. There are 2 girls in the show who are equally as well-known in the show, or equally the same amount of scripts, etc.
The magazine editors agreed to let Denver pose with both Tina Louise and Dawn Wells, but when that 1965 issue of TV Guide hit the stands, Wells was noticeably absent.
Of course, when the TV Guide cover came out, I was cut out of it completely. I think you see a little bit of my ponytail.
The rest of the cast, however, was having fun, especially the skipper, Alan Hale Jr., who grew up in the shadow of his famous father. Alan Hale Sr. was a successful movie star who began in silent films and later co-starred with Errol Flynn in the 1938 classic Robin Hood. Gilligan's Island gave Alan Jr. the kind of notoriety that his father enjoyed, notoriety that eluded him for 30 years as an actor.
The skipper was his alter ego. The minute he put that cap on, he wasn't Alan, he was the skipper. And every place we went, he wore the cap, every place.
Through all the years that I've been associated, of course, with Gilligan's Island, but going all over the world, people reach out and they have to touch you. There's a genuine fondness for the show. It's a remarkable thing. The skipper has taken me many places, and I must say that always with the open arms. It's just a lovely thing.
Although Russell Johnson preferred playing heavies and villains, the role of the professor presented unique challenges, including memorizing difficult scientific jargon.
Sherwood always made the professor say this stuff using 20 times more words than he needed to, and as big as words as possible, and as scientific as possible. So I had to sweat to learn this stuff, and I would.
As Thurston and Lovey Howell, Jim Backus and Natalie Schaefer looked and acted like a well-to-do society couple. They were so convincing in the roles that many fans thought that they were actually married.
You know, in New York, I was walking down the street one day, and somebody came up to me and said, oh, Mrs. Howell, Natalie Schaefer, this is very exciting. Where's your husband? And I said, my husband? Well, my husband's dead. And they said, oh, Mr. Backus is dead. I said, oh, no, that's my real husband.
I used to call her Jim's other wife. And as I say, I had known her for years, and she was a great girl and a hell of an actress.
Like many aging actresses, Schaefer wanted to cheat Father Time. Her contract stipulated no close-ups, and she absolutely refused to reveal how old she was, a secret that cast members didn't find out until many years later.
None of us had any idea how old Natalie was. You know, can you imagine when we were starting that show and jumping into the lagoon and freezing weather and all kinds of stuff? This woman was 60, doing all that as though she were 30.
I didn't find it difficult. I loved being in the lagoon and climbing out and having my hat over my face and mud on my face, and I loved that end of it. I'm very adaptable, though. I can land any place.
No one on Gilligan's Island garnered more attention than Dawn Wells. Playing wholesome Mary Ann, Wells received twice the fan mail of any of her co-stars, including Tina Louise, one of television's sexiest actresses.
I think the reason I got the most was it was boys and girls. I imagine most of Tina's mail was from men. And I think Mary Ann was you could be your girlfriend and you trust her and you could take her home. And I think young girls liked her too.
Maintaining the all-American image and look wasn't easy. Mary Ann was a nice girl, but she was frequently clad in nothing more than short shorts and a bikini top.
Every second I was dieting because I'm so little and I'm so short and it was in that skimpy outfit all the time. And I remember Sherwood coming to me once in the second season saying, take off 5 pounds, you're starting to put weight on. And very, very cautious of that image that was important.
Dawn's skimpy outfits caused concern among CBS executives who were determined not to jeopardize the show's family appeal. Wells was forbidden to expose her belly button, and Tina Louise was not allowed to reveal too much cleavage. Sex also was out of the question. There were no serious romances, and even the Howells slept in separate beds.
There are no car crashes, nobody gets shot, nobody gets raped, there's no murder. No one gets hurt. And everything is all right in the end.
There are no bad people in Gilligan's Island. They're all good. And they're funny.
I think people relate in some way. And also, I think something very important. There hasn't been enough laughter in the business. And I think laughter is very important. And I think people want to laugh. And Gilligan's Island, you can't help laughing.
At times, Gilligan's Island was quite literally a fairy tale.
We liked the dream sequences, of course, because we got to be something different. I liked the Cinderella. There was a wonderful episode with Cinderella and the Jack and the Beanstalk was another one that Bob Denver's little boy played Bob, and Alan played the giant.
Fairy tales and adoring fans didn't help Gilligan's Island escape the wrath of the media. Making fun of the series was expected. One of the most vocal critics was columnist Terence O'Flaherty.
One adorable thing about critics, and we're not a very adorable group, but is we never really agree on anything. And I think in this case, there must have been some kind of a basis for agreement there. It was amateurish at the time. I think it still looks amateurish to me.
Despite the barrage from critics, Gilligan's Island continued to draw large numbers of viewers. Veteran director Richard Donner, who got his start on the sitcom, was just as amused as the audience.
I laughed so hard, and I was so sick from laughing that I literally would leave the stage. I'd yell action and go off the stage and come back in, and the crew, we'd be tears running down our eyes.
Confused CBS executives, who were the main targets of criticism and jokes, were consistently amazed at the success of the hokey sitcom.
Gilligan's Island surprised me when it came to being a hit because I just thought it was kind of really dumb.
But not that dumb. The series ended the second season at number 19, and in the spring of 1966, Gilligan's Island was renewed for a third season. Coming up on the True Hollywood Story, the castaways go home permanently.
I had the onerous task of calling all these people that I had said, hey, happy days. Wasn't happy days.
And later, a long-awaited rescue.
They're coming in on the boat, and all these people are along the side yelling out things. Bands are playing.
On E!
By 1966, after 2 seasons on the air, Gilligan's Island was caught in a primetime tug-of-war. Critics ridiculed the quirky sitcom, but viewers loved the silly, sweethearted portrayal of survival on a deserted island. But how long would that love affair keep the castaways on the air?
I think we really thought we were renewed when we left on our March vacation because we had scripts purchased. And we'll see you in July and all of that. I mean, I think we were pretty confident that we were renewed.
The writers on Gilligan's Island often stretched the sitcom's premise to accommodate guest stars like Phil Silvers. 14-year-old Kurt Russell played a jungle boy abandoned on the island as a baby. And Zsa Zsa Gabor appeared as a wealthy socialite. And comedian Don Rickles portrayed a professional thief on a quest to get away from civilization. In 1966, during the show's third season, handsome Denny Scott Miller appeared as an aspiring actor doing research for a future role as Tarzan.
One of the scenes that Tina and I did was a takeoff between the me Tarzan, you Jane, you know, I punch myself, I punch you. And she had to say, me Ginger, you Tongo. And I had broken her wonderful high-backed carved antique chair, so the rehearsals, you could hear the swats she toned it down once we got in front of the camera, but I didn't bruise, but I swelled up a little bit.
Even some of the cast family members got into the act in cameo roles. Bob Denver's son, Patrick, played a young Gilligan in an episode that recreated Jack and the Beanstalk, and Jim Backus's wife, Henny, put a ring through her nose to portray the mother of a native island girl who wants to marry Gilligan.
I never had so much fun in my life. Imagine, I didn't have any lines. I had to make it up as I went along because I played an island lady. I didn't have to wear a girdle or high heels or have makeup put on or look as well as I could.
The few guest stars who made their way onto Gilligan's Island disappeared as mysteriously as they arrived, but exotic animals were always around to keep the castaways company, often creating their own brand of chaos. During one rehearsal, a tiger wandered away from his trainer and into the makeup area where he nearly frightened Russell Johnson out of his chair.
And I just sat there looking in the mirror, and this tiger went just walking, and went right on by all the way around, came around the other side. Finally, the trainers got a hold of this tiger. And I want to tell you, we had lions on our show. One even made a lunge at Bob one time, pulling the trainers with him. A lion is one thing, but a tiger is another thing completely. I'm telling you, I was really scared.
Tigers and lions weren't the only dangers. The actors often felt like they were marooned in a Three Stooges routine.
I fell around and knocked myself out so many times in that show. I remember thinking, I've used up every way to fall down and knock myself out. Like I ran into doors, I ran into coconut trees, I fell down.
Stunt doubles were used for the difficult feats, but the skipper, Alan Hale, insisted on doing all of his own stunts. During one scene, Hale fell out of a coconut tree and broke his wrist. Always the trooper, Hale waited until the show went on hiatus before seeing a doctor, a total of 3 weeks.
If it had been a show where the scripts were full of all kinds of tragedy and divorce and all this, he wouldn't have been interested. It was just good fun, at times slapstick entertainment, and that's why he enjoyed doing the show so much.
CBS executives weren't as fond of Gilligan's Island. In September 1966, they switched the series to a new day and time. It was the third such move in as many years.
You didn't know what it was going to do to your ratings, and ratings were all important. That's what kept you on the air.
In the new slot Monday night at 7:30, Gilligan's Island continued to beat the competition, most notably The Monkees on ABC.
And it turned out that Gilligan's was super powerful, and every time they wanted to bolster up something that was sinking, they'd slam Gilligan in there, and it would always come through for them.
Although Gilligan's Island led the ratings for its time slot, many viewers jumped ship. By the middle of the third season in December 1966, the series fell out of the top 20 for the first time in 2 years.
We were doing very well against all opposition, and in spite of the fact that we were on a different night and a different time for 3 years, which I didn't think was fair to me and fair to my cast.
The show still had a strong following. In the mid-60s, network fares such as Bewitched, Green Acres, and Gilligan's Island offered weekly doses of light-hearted comedy. The sitcoms were a stark contrast to the evening news, which was filled with violent images of the Vietnam War and civil unrest at home.
Maybe it was one of the reasons why this show was so popular, in a sense, that people could turn away from that for 30 minutes.
You did feel a little trite sometimes. And yet you brought laughter and escape to an awful lot of people that maybe coming home in the afternoon with all this blowing up of buildings and all the Vietnam things starting and all of that, that maybe it was refreshing to take them away from that. So maybe you were providing sort of a little ray of sunshine.
Working on Gilligan's Island may have offered a positive outlet for Bob Denver, whose personal life was also in turmoil. In December 1966, after 6 years of marriage, Denver's wife, Margaret, filed for divorce on grounds of cruelty. The couple had 2 children. Despite a barrage of media attention, Denver kept his troubles to himself.
He's so private, he didn't talk about it, and I don't know that we even knew it was going on till it was over, you know. But I'm sure there was conflict because of the kids and all of that. I'm sure he must have gone through some troubled times.
On screen, however, Denver remained the lovable Gilligan. By the end of the 3rd season in March 1967, the show's ratings were down, but still respectable. Producer Sherwood Schwartz received a vote of confidence from CBS executives.
I had called the cast and told them that we're renewed for another year, which I'd been told by CBS.
It seemed the castaways would spend a 4th year on Gilligan's Island. That was until William Paley, the president of CBS, returned from vacation. Network programmers finalized the 1967 and 68 season schedule in Paley's absence. In the process, they canceled the long-running Gunsmoke.
When he came back, he did a what happened to Gunsmoke question, and everybody trembled and had to figure out how to get it back on.
Paley was the most powerful and influential man in television, and Gunsmoke was his favorite show. Despite declining ratings, Paley demanded that Gunsmoke be reinstated. That meant one show had to go. Network executives quickly targeted the sitcom they loved to hate.
The show was canceled after being picked up for another year. And I had the onerous task of calling all these people that I had said, hey, happy days. Wasn't happy days.
I already had that money spent. Yeah, we were told we were picked up for a 4th year. And then, I don't know, maybe perhaps 2 weeks later, the phone call came from Sherwood saying, I'm sorry, guys. But they changed the schedule and we're out.
In April 1967, after 3 seasons and 98 episodes, the improbable run of Gilligan's Island ended with no rescue in sight.
You know, that was, for that, a kid show, those cycles, about 3 years is a very good run for that kind of a show.
The abrupt cancellation of Gilligan's Island shocked and disappointed most of the tight-knit cast.
Now Alan's in tears. He came home and he said, we've been canceled. I said, honey, what do you say? And he sat down and he had tears in his eyes. He says, the show has been canceled.
The series was canceled and I lost my father the same week. So it was really, it was a devastating sort of thing to me.
The cast members also quickly came to miss each other.
And we didn't have a chance to say goodbye. That was another thing. To hug all the crew goodbye and everything. There were no final episodes, so to speak.
I was very sad about it. And then when I realized what a change it was going to be.
In an attempt to shake the image of Lovey Howell, Natalie Schafer returned to her roots on Broadway. Fellow actor and close friend Maury Hill recalls one of Schafer's first performances after Gilligan's Island in The Killing of Sister George.
She played this rather austere lesbian character, and she was marvelous. I mean, it was a complete switch from Mrs. Howell, and she got a big kick out of doing that.
Tina Louise was even more anxious than Schafer to break free from the Gilligan's Island mold.
She believes that appearing as Ginger on Gilligan's Island has limited her life away from drama, because that was her ambition, is to be a great dramatic actress.
Before her role on Gilligan's Island, Louise appeared in a string of movies, including the critically acclaimed God's Little Acre in 1958. But resurrecting her film career in the late 1960s wasn't easy. Louise was offered few of the dramatic roles that she sought. In 1969, the 35-year-old actress returned to her persona as a sex symbol when she portrayed a seductive gypsy in the comedy The Wrecking Crew, starring Dean Martin.
I'm a gypsy, Mr. Hell. My father was a gypsy, and he taught us one thing. Wise men enjoy pleasure before business.
I like your father's thinking.
Although Louise continued to seek out more meaningful parts, her attempts to disassociate herself from Gilligan's Island proved fruitless, a frustration she shared with the rest of her former co-stars. Coming up on the True Hollywood Story, the castaways struggled to escape their roles.
If they say, "Are you Ginger?" "No, I'm Tina."
And later, Gilligan's Island goes mainstream.
We're stranded on a desert isle.
No phone?
No lights?
No motor car?
Not a single luxury.
Gilligan's Island drew viewers by the millions, but good ratings were not enough to save the series. In 1967, after 3 seasons, the sitcom was abruptly canceled. The end of Gilligan's Island didn't stop the audience's love affair with the show. The sitcom became an instant hit in syndication, forever marooning the castaways in their roles.
I don't want to just be playing Mary Ann's, because I feel everybody come and see you one time to see what you look like. It's like going to the zoo.
For 3 seasons, Gilligan's Island provided notoriety and steady work for the 7 castaways. But when the series was canceled in 1967, the show's talented ensemble received a chilly reception from Hollywood.
I had played a lot of heavies, a lot of bad guys, and after Gilligan's went off the air, people didn't see me that way anymore. Now they said, "What? Oh, yeah, he doesn't play heavies." It's amazing, the shortness of sight, so to speak.
The new young network people didn't approve. I mean, you know, they didn't know that we ever did anything else. I had a young network boy interview me one day, and he said, "Now tell me, Miss Schaefer, what have you done?" And I looked at him and, I said, "You first." And he spent 20 minutes telling me what he did at the Yale Drama School. When he finished, I said, "Thank you very much," and left.
The exception to the backlash was Bob Denver. He was a bankable comedic actor with the many loves of Dobie Gillis and Gilligan's Island now to his credit. CBS brass desperately wanted to keep Denver in their stable of television stars. They recommended him for the lead in a new sitcom headed up by Leonard Stern, formerly the executive producer of Get Smart.
There was some mischief quality that was inherent in him. He had a smile that always seemed to be bemused. And that was very appealing to me.
Stern's new show was titled The Good Guys, a comedy about a married restaurant owner and his bachelor friend who envy each other's lifestyles. Denver was offered and accepted the role of the single friend, Rufus Butterworth. Herb Edelman and Joyce Van Patten were cast as the married couple. The Good Guys premiered on CBS in September 1968.
There's a double order of fun in store for Wednesday nights this fall as Bob Denver returns to the winner's circle in a new role as Rufus Butterworth, taxi driver and best pal of diner owner Bert Gramus, played by Herb Edelman.
3,000? $150 worth. 3,000 rolls.
Did you count them in a big order like that? They might have short rolled you.
Although Bob Denver was cast in another comedy, the actor wanted to prove he could do more than pratfalls and slapstick.
And I think he, too, was desirous of doing something markedly different. We weren't able to do as much, we weren't able to make as many distinctions between our show and the previous ones as we would have liked to have done. Because the networks had a concept of Bob as irrevocably goofy and totally good-natured and rather inept. And I was trying to get away from that, and so was he.
Denver struggled with his new character, and the Good Guys struggled in the ratings. Even the additions of Denver cohorts Alan Hale Jr. and Jim Backus to the cast during season 2 didn't change the course of the show. After 2 disappointing seasons, The Good Guys was canceled in 1970.
Bob was very much a victim of a successful image. He could not shed it. And that's why I say we both were disappointed that our original intentions of a good guy was not realized.
For the first time in 12 years, 36-year-old Bob Denver didn't have a job on a primetime television series. The failure of The Good Guys diminished Denver's marquee value at CBS. His reputation was further tarnished by an arrest for drug possession in February 1971 when police found marijuana in his car. Denver pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of possession of narcotics paraphernalia and was fined $250.
When Bob Denver was arrested for possessing drug paraphernalia naturally threw the whole network into a crisis. They were probably worried about whether it would happen again and whether they would want to bet all their money, and it's millions of dollars, on a show with somebody who appeared to be that unstable.
Following the arrest, Denver left Los Angeles and his television acting career. He toured the country performing in dinner theater. The transition from Gilligan's Island proved equally disconcerting for the rest of the castaways.
I think you always are optimistic coming off of a series thinking, well, you know, now I'm going to really get to do a role that's going to really stretch me. And I think the realistic side of it is that you're pretty typed. And we've been pretty typed because we've been on the air and never been off the air.
By the early 1970s, Gilligan's Island became a mega hit in syndication. The sitcom aired every day, sometimes more than once, on stations across the country as well as abroad.
Even through the 70s, I thought it'd die. You know, I'd just see it kind of fade and slowly disappear, not knowing that the little guys are picking it up and watching it, you know. So the fans never stop. They just grow up to be 12, having seen each episode 100 times. And then the next group comes, the next group comes.
The constant airplay turned the cast into television icons.
I've done hundreds and hundreds of television shows of all kinds, and films, 30-some films and all of that. Well, that doesn't mean a damn thing. The only thing it means anything to anybody around anymore is the fact that I'm the professor on a show called Gilligan's Island. It's astounding how that happened. But I resented it.
If they say, "Are you Ginger?" "No, I'm Tina." You know, they "Are you from Gilligan's Island?" "No, I'm from Manhattan." I have my little, my little answers to sort of hold on to my sanity.
To make matters worse, the actors from Gilligan's Island did not benefit from the millions of dollars the show generated in syndication revenue. The contracts the cast signed stipulated that residual payments be limited to the first 6 rebroadcasts of each episode.
If I had the vaguest notion this was going to happen, I mean, if somebody had suggested it or I'd heard about it and I could have made a deal, but I didn't, but it didn't go by my agent's mind or my mind or no one I'd ever talked to in those early 60s. And you just, you hope maybe you get 2 years of reruns and you'd be paid off. And then in 1975, I went, I wonder. And then in 1985, I went, well, this is amazing.
It was a bad deal for any actor to say, yes, I'll take that money. See, because you would ended up, let them run it out.
The ongoing popularity of Gilligan's Island didn't bother creator Sherwood Schwartz, who retained part ownership in the series and continues to receive a percentage of the syndication profits. Although Schwartz went on to create another successful series in the Brady Bunch, he never forgot the castaways or their fate.
Many people were asking and questioning why Gilligan's Island never had a final episode. Whatever happened to it? I said to myself, I'll bet that they would love to see another episode of that show and find out whatever happened to those people.
In 1974, Sherwood Schwartz's son, Lloyd, collaborated with his father on a new project about the rescue of the castaways.
The idea of doing Rescue from Gilligan's Island wasn't any attempt to bring the show back. It was a sense of completion and a sense of conclusion to this thing and a great story to tell.
The project was a movie titled Rescue from Gilligan's Island. The Schwartzes shot their idea to each of the networks, including CBS, which aired the original series.
I made a daily trek to all 3 channels. At that time, there were only 3.
None of the networks were interested in a movie based on the zany series, but Sherwood Schwartz continued to push his script, and in 1978, he finally found a taker. NBC president Fred Silverman, whose network languished in 3rd place, greenlighted a 2-hour movie that would bring closure to the Gilligan's Island saga. Neither NBC nor any other production company was willing to ante up all of the money Schwartz said he needed to make the movie.
So they told me that it was impossible to get more than $1.1 million for a 2-hour show from NBC. And I said, well, I don't think it can be done the way I've written it. It's not going to be $1.1 million, it's going to be more than that.
Schwartz then took drastic measures to see his dream realized.
I went to the bank. I said, I have a nice house. I have some stock, which I'm selling. So I sold everything to put up the balance of the money to get this thing done properly.
Coming up next on the True Hollywood Story, a dramatic rescue.
I can't believe it. After 15 years, we're finally rescued.
And some sad goodbyes.
It was hard to realize that now there's just the four of us.
The Body.
Long after Gilligan's Island was abruptly canceled in 1967, millions of fans still wondered what happened to the lovable castaways. For years, series creator Sherwood Schwartz battled network executives to answer that question. Finally, in 1978, Schwartz was given the go-ahead to shoot a television movie, Rescue from Gilligan's Island. But the rescue wouldn't save everyone.
You know, they weren't too good in the movies of the week, you know, coming up with the cash.
Mm-hmm. Well, TV.
I'm very expensive, Michael.
Are you? I know. I like that.
In the spring of 1978, Sherwood Schwartz began the task of reuniting the original cast for Rescue from Gilligan's Island. Schwartz immediately signed 6 of the 7 actors, including Dawn Wells.
One of the most appealing things was we didn't get to say goodbye. And to be able to all be together again was very exciting.
The exception was Tina Louise, who had been trying to distance herself from Gilligan's Island since the series went off the air.
She has never forgiven the show for destroying her dramatic career. And that's why she won't appear in anything connected with it.
To Schwartz's surprise, Louise actually considered reprising the role of Ginger for a price.
Heaven and earth was moved to try and get her to do it. There was a lot of money offered, as was to all the actors.
Louise was offered $50,000, about the same amount as the other actors, but Tina wanted twice as much money. Schwartz felt the long-awaited reunion would translate into huge ratings. Nevertheless, he rejected Louise's demand.
I can admire her principles, but I think sometimes if your principles are so weak, you're better off with practicality, because she could have made a lot of money.
It was very disappointing, not from my point of view as a producer, but I just think that it would have been nice to see all of them back.
Schwartz brought in another tall, voluptuous redhead to fill Louise's shoes, 32-year-old Judith Baldwin.
My agent called me. I went on the audition. I met Sherwood. And the next thing I knew, I had the part. It was really fast. It was exciting and a little intimidating at the same time. I think people were watching me a little more closely, maybe. You know, the cast was.
Baldwin looked and sounded a lot like Louise, but she wasn't the original movie star.
Gilligan, I just saw the Howells, and they were talking about what to wear to a rescue. You do know something about it. Oh, you'd really like to tell Ginger all about it, wouldn't you?
I mean, Tina was Ginger. Nobody could duplicate that. It was another performance altogether. I felt there was a tremendous, loss in the sense of not having Tina with us.
It was different. It was not the same, I don't think, without Tina. Because Ginger and I were together a lot. There was a chemistry between us that worked.
Despite Louise's absence, the cast picked up where they left off. The filming of Rescue from Gilligan's Island got underway in July 1978.
It was as if we had stopped on a Friday and started again on Monday. There wasn't a moment of hesitation. There wasn't a moment of awkwardness. Everybody just fell right into their characters. It was very, very, very spooky, actually.
It was like the 12 years had fallen away. It was like, it was easy. It was as though we had just finished last week and we're starting another show.
The 12-year hiatus did not affect the opinions of the critics either. Their reviews were no kinder than they had been for the original series. The movie premiered on Saturday, October 14th. Viewers once again ignored the negative press and tuned in record numbers.
I can't believe it. After 15 years, we're finally rescued.
Rescued. Rescued. Rescued.
Rescued.
Rescued.
Rescued. Rescue from Gilligan's Island scored a whopping 52 share of the audience, sinking the popular Love Boat, which had never lost its time slot.
That's over to half the people in the United States. So was I right or wrong thinking that people were going to tune in?
Following the stunning victory of Rescue from Gilligan's Island, NBC executives promptly offered Sherwood Schwartz and his son Lloyd a deal to produce a weekly one-hour series featuring the original castaways.
The cast members were not kids at that point, and Gilligan's Island's a very physical show. So we couldn't anticipate the Howells running around in circles again because they were not of that age, and Bob Denver hanging from a tree wasn't going to be possible.
Look out below!
So it evolved into, we agreed to do some movies of the week.
The Schwartzes quickly produced 2 more movies for NBC, The Castaways on Gilligan's Island in 1979 and The Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island in 1981. Production on the last movie began on a sad note. Jim Backus, who had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in the late 1970s, was too ill to carry on his role as Thurston Howell III.
He was beginning to have trouble walking, and it's a very strange disease. I think the brain sends down false messages. If you want to walk forward, it tells you to go backwards.
You see this happening to a man who was such a humorous life force, was just devastating to all of us who were close to him.
The writers dealt with Backus's absence by creating a new character, Thurston Howell IV, played by newcomer David Ruprecht.
I didn't want to do a caricature of Jim Backus, but I certainly had to have all of the flavor that he had, you know, and his attitude. And so I did practice. Like I said, I would eat, sleep, and drank Thurston Howell III so that I could do Thurston Howell IV.
It was a very painful rewrite because we were taking Mr. Howell out of it. And Jim had wanted to do the movie very badly.
However, Backus didn't give up without a fight.
So we're filming the picture, and we come down to this last scene, and Jim calls and says he thinks he can do a day on this movie.
He was just brought in by Natalie for a second, barely able to walk and very sick. He insisted on doing it.
The movie's bittersweet finale saw Jim Backus, visibly disabled by Parkinson's, bravely make one of the final appearances of his 40-year career.
It was one of the saddest moments that I can remember. He came with his caregiver, and he was shuffling and held my hand and walked onto the camera and did his little bit that he had to do, and then he came and he took a hold of my hand and he said, "Was I funny?" I just started to cry. I mean, he didn't know.
That was really crushing, because it was the first time we were looking at the mortality there of the characters.
In 1984, a frail but feisty Backus wrote Backus Strikes Back with his wife Henny. The book was about the actor's battle with Parkinson's disease, a battle that he was slowly losing.
It was my job to make him exercise, which wasn't easy, and to cheer him up, which was tough. I used to have to go to the bathroom and put a wash rag down my throat and scream because I didn't dare cry in front of him.
In June 1989, 76-year-old Jim Backus entered St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, California for a series of treatments. During his stay, Backus contracted pneumonia. The well-loved actor died 2 weeks later on July 3rd.
We were best friends. All the laughs have gone out of my life. But what I have that most people don't, I'm so lucky, I've got movies, cassettes, of us on talk shows and game shows and acting together and home movies. And when I miss Jimmy too much, I will play those, one or two of them. Cry a little bit, laugh a little bit, and it brings them closer.
Just 6 months after the death of Jim Backus, the skipper, Alan Hale Jr., died in Los Angeles on January 2nd, 1990, after a year-long bout with cancer. He was 68.
He was in a coma, and the priest of the hospital was in there, and we just went in and started praying. And he rallied once, and he saw us all there, and then the time came and he took a big deep breath and he was gone.
He was always putting his arms around you, always giving you a hug, joyful, had a real spirit of joy within him.
Alan was probably one of the nicest human beings you could ever know. There was never a negative thought or a cranky disposition, or he was just kind and loving and dear.
Natalie Schaefer became the 3rd cast member to pass away in less than 2 years on April 10th, 1991. The 90-year-old actress died peacefully in her sleep at home in Beverly Hills. Longtime friend Maury Hill was by Schaefer's side.
So I said, "Well, are you all right?" And she said, "I'm going to take a pain pill, and that always puts me to sleep for a little bit." And I waited, and then I went in again, and then she was gone. So it was certainly a good way, and I think it's what she wanted, you know, to just sleep away. What more can you ask at 90 years old?
With the passing of Natalie Schaefer, Jim Backus, and Alan Hale Jr., Gilligan's Island would never feel the same.
They were a third of the characters in my show, and they were responsible for my success. They were still my friends, dead or alive.
It was hard to realize that now there's just the four of us.
Coming up on the True Hollywood Story, some cast members cash in on their Gilligan fame, while others become victims.
And everybody's so judgmental. It's really too bad. It really is too bad, because an awful lot of people are hurt.
Gilligan's Island has entertained and amused television viewers since the mid-1960s. Cast members Jim Backus, Natalie Schaefer, and Alan Hale have passed away. Still, the timeless show airs every day in more than 60 countries and 30 languages, and the phenomenon appears to be far from over.
Gilligan's Island has become Americana, and it is always going to be part of our fabric.
More than 30 years after production wrapped on the final episode of Gilligan's Island, no one associated with the show has been able to escape its ongoing popularity.
I've run into people and say, weren't you involved with Gilligan's Island? And I always want to say no, and I never say yes. And then they'll say, oh, come on, you must remember them. And then they'll describe a whole scene.
It was probably one of the great delights and will always be in my entire life, no matter what I ever do, whether it's commercials or film or documentaries or features or what. Gilligan's Island was a wonderful, special time in my life of making film.
Gilligan's Island is one of the handful of television shows that actually became part of American culture. The sitcom even made the leap from the small screen to the stage.
You're the biggest knucklehead I ever met. I've been clear sailing and my course was set.
From cartoons to contests to commercials, the series is continuously being reinvented.
My boyfriend was supposed to send me money to take a cruise.
But he didn't use Western Union?
No, the money never made it. I only had enough for a 3-hour tour.
Then the weather started getting rough.
And the tiny ship was tossed. We were stranded on a desert isle.
No phone? No lights? No motor car?
Not a single luxury.
Like Robinson Crusoe?
As primitive as can be.
All because your boyfriend didn't use Western Union.
Right, so I dumped him for a professor.
Hey, it's your money. Use Western Union, the fastest way to send money worldwide.
I've heard that theme in so many different ways. I heard barbershop quartet do it. I've heard jazz versions. I've heard classical versions. And it's like every time there's the crowd and they want to get them together, they sing, okay, let's sing some songs so we can all get to know each other. And they say, what do you want to sing? Gilligan's Island. And by the time they end singing it, they're all laughing and talking. You know the show I like in my episode was, and they're like, you watch it and listen, 5 minutes, all these strangers are now good friends.
In the early 1990s, original castaways Bob Denver, Russell Johnson, and Dawn Wells capitalized on their fame by each writing books.
Hi there, I'm Dawn Wells, just about to show you some of my good home cooking. Mary Ann was a good cook, you know, and I guess that's what you know me best as.
Unlike the other surviving cast members, Tina Louise has not actively promoted her association with Gilligan's Island and declines most interview requests on the subject.
Acting is really not the center for me anymore. I don't know where my life will take me at this point. Not that I won't, but I'm sort of open to a lot of different experiences.
Russell Johnson left Hollywood in 1988 and ironically settled on an island near Seattle. Semi-retired, Johnson does occasional voiceover work and devotes time to various AIDS charities following the death of his son David from the disease.
Mercifully, finally, he went in October of '94. He was 39. He was a valuable member of society, contributed, made life easier for some people. Not everybody can say that.
Almost 40 years after she first played the role of Mary Ann, Dawn Wells stays busier than ever. She has appeared in more than 60 plays, hosted her own outdoor adventure show, and recently held a camp for aspiring actors. Wells is grateful for the role that made her famous.
I'm happy that as an actress who started out wanting to make a living, never wanting to be a star, just wanting to work at something I really love to do, that I've been able to do that. And that the character of Mary Ann has given me more longevity than perhaps I would have had otherwise.
Although Natalie Schaefer died in 1991, her legacy lives on through the Natalie Schaefer Wing at the Motion Picture and Television Hospital in Los Angeles. The wing was opened in 1994 in recognition of the $2 million donation from Schaefer's estate. In memory of her loving husband of 40 years, Henny Backus completed a fifth book in 1999. Care for the Caretaker tells how the couple dealt with their 11-year battle with Parkinson's disease.
I just had a feeling that everybody needed help. Not only people with Parkinson patients, but people with patients. Because I came out of it healthy. I had found the trick of taking care of myself while I took care of Jim and the house and did all the other things I had to do.
Trinket Hale lives in the same house she and Alan Jr. shared during their 26-year marriage. The walls are covered with photographs from Hale's lengthy career in television and movies.
Well, we had a lot of fun through our marriage. We really did. We had wonderful times. And together we met wonderful people.
The syndication success of Gilligan's Island has kept the show star Bob Denver in the spotlight. In 1991, Denver and his fourth wife, Dreamer, moved to a small town in West Virginia. The remote location didn't protect Denver from the national media attention he received following a 1998 arrest for possession of marijuana. Denver pleaded no contest to the charge and was given 6 months probation. He has made few public appearances since the incident.
Everybody's so judgmental. It's really too bad. It really is too bad because an awful lot of people are hurt for no reason. If I've been married 5 times, God, wouldn't that be great to talk about it because it's Mary Ann? And I suppose that's why it hit the news so much with Bob, because of the innocence of his character and all of that.
The eternally persistent Sherwood Schwartz continues to look for ways to keep the Gilligan's Island franchise going strong. He and his son Lloyd are working on several related projects, including a theatrical film and a remake of the original series with a multiracial cast.
I never expected this. I'm glad it happened, but that was not why I created these shows. I created it because I thought the audiences would like it and be entertained by it. Other people can make a lot more money than I can make, but I don't think other people can do any better than what I've been able to do.
Thousands of people have gathered here to welcome the passengers and crew of the ill-fated minnow shipwrecked so long ago. That must be Gilligan up there on top doing the steering. Here they come into the marina now, rescued in the very huts in which they lived on the island. Newsmen and photographers are swarming all over the place trying to get a glimpse of the happy group missing for so many years. And look at that mob waving and cheering.
Oh, I'm afraid we've been away a long time.
Yes, it seems that